What have the mayors where you are been telling President Macron?
Well, Emmanuel Macron talking to the 600, mainly mayors from rural communities here in Normandy, gathered in the hall behind me, addressing them very quickly before taking his seat to listen to their grievances and the grievances of their electors. Macron very keen to show that he is now listening after those protests that you were talking about, which got underway in the autumn and have led to, at times, violent scenes in Paris. The grievances, well, very much those of communities like this one, the so-called small town France, peripheral France, where people feel that they've been left by the wayside for decades. Most of those mayors will acknowledge that that's not entirely Emmanuel Macron's fault, but they're not happy at the direction that his policy was taking, the impression that he was refusing to listen to communities like theirs. A lot of grievances coming out of things like public services, which they say have been chipped away at for decades, a lack of public transport, which has forced people into their cars. Remember those yellow vest, Gilets jaunes protests? Well, they became pretty multifaceted in the end, but they started off as a revolt against the proposed rise in fuel tax.
Chris, some commentators are saying that this is a last chance for Macron.
That's right, yes. The protests are a new phenomenon in some ways here in France. The fact that they developed apparently quite organically, often on the internet, the lack of a clear leadership, the various factions, the level of violence that we saw particularly on the streets of the capital, and the fact that a lot of that violence, a lot of that anger, talking to protesters out on the streets, has been directed towards the personality of Emmanuel Macron, how he's behaved in his first 18 months or so in office, this impression that he's been aloof, arrogant, that he's governed in favour of the rich. Now, this national conversation, as he calls it, is Macron's way of responding to that. Whether or not it works, it's going to be a question of the confidence that it inspires in people. You were talking there about him saying there were no taboo subjects. Well, as one of the mayors here pointed out today, yes, there are 35 questions to get our teeth stuck into, but at the same time, if you've refused to reverse your decision on the wealth tax, for example, which is something which a lot of those protesters wanted. Initial surveys showing that a bit of a mixed picture. A lot of French people keen in participating in this process, but at the same time, a lot of them also very sceptical about it.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Chris Moore reporting.